The third part is about language, culture, and thought. Relationship between language and culture, because it is very difficult to understand culture without language, or the dynamics of language without the understanding of culture. Language is what defines us as humans, and humans are culturally and socially entwined. So basically, language defines us as humans means that it's a reflection of, a representation of whatever we feel, whatever we think. We represent it through the medium of language. And when we are expressing ourselves, basically we are expressing our cultural values and norms, and culturally, that is why language is culturally and socially intertwined, which means that we have not only, or we are representing not only the linguistic knowledge, we are also demonstrating our cultural knowledge of any language that we are speaking or expressing ourselves in. The definition of culture, as per American Heritage Dictionary, is that it is the totality of socially transmitted behavior patterns, arts, beliefs, institutions, and all other products of human work and thought. So basically, the totality of everything which is socially present there or socially acknowledged, that is our behavior, the patterns, behavior patterns, and the arts and beliefs, institutions, and everything that is there which constitute culture. Also, intellectual and artistic activity and the works produced by it. So the first is the totality of everything, and then also the intellectual and artistic activity. So culture represents that, the intellectual as well as the artistic activity and the work which is produced by the culture. In an image in front of you, you can see the relationship between language and culture. There are four constructs that underlie the integral relationship between culture and language. The first says, culture defines language and language shapes culture. Now this means that individuals are made by culture on one level and culture is made by individual on the other. So basically it's the individual who contribute in making or shaping a culture, and then in return the values of the culture are inculcated in the individuals to form their identity. Language is a symbol of one's culture. For example, in our country we have Urdu, and Urdu symbolizes our nation or Pakistani nation, and personal identity is the one who speaks this language is known as Pakistani. Then we have cultural groups having different worldviews based on their own culture, shared experiences. So the culture or shared experiences, they look at the world or have the worldviews based on the experiences of their personal cultural experiences, or the experiences which are the shared experiences. Language is the medium through which individuals transmit culture from generation to generation. So in terms of language, that expresses cultural reality as speakers communicate their ideas, feelings, and facts with language, both in inter and intra-societal setup. Now that is what we mean by having different worldviews based on one's own culture's shared experiences. And when we are discussing the language having an ability to transmit culture, it is seen in this point where it says that culture is socially acquired knowledge. As in every society, the collective set of social values, beliefs, forms are transmitted from one generation to another by the process of socialization. So here you see the language as a medium or vehicle of transmitting of norms and values through the process of socialization or interaction from one generation to another generation. Now we have language and thought. Now under this, the most important element that we need to understand comes from Spearhoff hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, the structure of a language people habitually use influence the ways they think and behave. So people who habitually use a set structure of a language basically influence the way they think and the way they behave in a given situation. Different languages offer different ways of expressing in the world around, and they think and speak differently. So the hypothesis suggests that different languages provide a different way of thinking and expressing themselves in different situations. This hypothesis proposed linguistic determinism and linguistic relativity. Linguistic determinism is where the individuals experience the world based on the structure of the language they habitually use. So they experience the world around them based on the way they express themselves and the kind of structure they use habitually use as far as their language is concerned. Linguistic relativity is what we perceive is limited by language in which we think, speak, different languages, different pattern of thinking. So our perception is limited by the language that we speak, which means that there are so many languages that are being spoken, and then there are so many different ways in which people perceive and develop the understanding of the world around them. In front of you, there's an image which contains the examples of linguistic determinism and linguistic relativity. Now, linguistic determinism, as you can say, a person's view of reality comes from his or her language. Even similar languages cannot represent same reality. We have Eskimos who have over 20 words for different types of snow. They can visually see the distinction because they have words to describe the distinction. So they have more than 20 words to describe snow. They have words for the snow on the ground, falling snow, hard-packed snow, etc. Whereas the Essex had a single word for cold, snow, and ice. So even in the English language, you see that we have one word to describe this thing, that is snow, but Eskimos have over 20 words. So this is explaining or representing same reality differently. Again, the language is also the same. Looking at the linguistic relativity, a person's perception is limited by a language or she speaks. Now, there was this study conducted on Zeno tribe, and it was observed that when this image was given, there's only one word, which is yellow. And while as the English speakers or speaker, they have more than one word to describe all these different shades of yellow. They can say they have this is yellow, then they have orange or peach, etc. So their vocabulary is limited and they are relying on only one word, that is yellow, which describes all these shades. Whereas the English speakers, they have more vocabulary items in terms of explaining or expressing their perception as far as different shades of colors are given. Then we also have the criticism, which is there as far as this particular hypothesis is concerned, that if language determines thought, then it must precede thought, which means that it should come before thought. But that is not the case, because not all activities involve language, but they do involve thought. Even pre-linguistic babies can think before they actually speak or they get engaged in a process of language communication. So another criticism is the differences are not in thought, but in ways of expressing the same thought. So differences is not in the thought, but rather in the ways those thoughts are expressed. Otherwise, it would not be possible to have the process of translation. This hypothesis not generally accepted that language channels thought, that language regulates thought. So this is again one of the criticisms that this particular hypothesis faces. To conclude, language, being a vehicle of communication, determines and influences thought and culture influences people's language as ideas, discoveries, inventions create a need for new words.